So we had some projects that we were thinking about, like how can we trick Macs into simulating mouse clicks or key presses or something like that, right? And that functionality is not built into the Macs language itself. But the cool thing about programming languages is that oftentimes people will write snippets of code or functions of code that are useful and that they think might be useful to other people, and so they'll share them. And in other programming languages, these are often referred to as libraries, where you get a collection of functions that aren't inherent to the language, but are like an extension to it. So in Macs, we've got a few different ways we can work with those libraries. Externals are usually for one-off objects, and packages are for whole collections of objects. And so to do this key and mouse simulation pressing, I need to use an external object that was developed by someone else. And in a way, it's almost like one of these subpatchers that someone has made and packaged together and then shared. You can find externals. This is just an overview of how to install them all over the web, in forums, in the Macs site, in this place called maxobjects.com. They've got like an archive of 9,000 externals. So there's tons of stuff out there. The problem with externals is that they've been making externals, people have been making externals since like Macs 4, right? So it's possible that there's an external out there that does what you want it to do, but it only works with Macs 5, or it only works on Windows Vista, or you have to match the version of Macs and the operating system and the hardware and make sure everything still works. So the ones I'm going to show you are actually written for Macs 5, but they happen to still work in Macs 7. So, hey, well, while they still work, let's keep using them. A lot of times you'll see it with like when new hardware comes out, like Connect, everyone gets excited and writes an external for it, and then stops developing or maintaining it. So it's 8 years old now. So let's look first at, to work with the mouse and keyboard, it's going to be helpful to look at the keyboard itself just as it is in Mac. So I've got an input for keyboard here. And we can use the key object to give us information about keyboard presses. And so anytime I press the keyboard, it's going to give me the ASCII code for that key. So if I press the spacebar, I get a 32. If I press Q, I get 113. If I press 1, I get 49. And the ASCII code is a byte that how the computer understands the character value of that key. So for example, for this one, I can press, not there, sorry, up here, I can press any number of keys, and I've just got to select 32 on here, so whenever I press the space bar, it's going to toggle that toggle. Okay, so that's one way I could use the keyboard as input in my Macs patch. If I want to make like a button or something that people use on the keyboard, this is a way I can do that. And you can see over here, I'm using this integer to a, or character, to convert back from the integer to whatever character it is. So you can see I'm pressing 7, I'm pressing 9. And I did that just to show you what I'm doing over here. There's no real reason to do this. All right, so that's getting the key. So now let's look at simulating a mouse click. So if I want, for instance, when someone claps, it simulates a mouse click. Or when someone waves in front of the camera, it simulates a mouse click. How can I do stuff like that? I need to use the this aka.mouse external. So I've given you a link here, and you can go find this site. And so these externals were developed by Masayuki Akamatsu, and they are quite good. And there's a whole bunch of them for keyboard, for mouse, speech, There's a good one for Wiimote in here too. A bunch of different things. And so if you click on any of these, it'll have a download link here, and you get a zip file, and you open the zip file, and you've got something called aka.keyboard.help and aka.keyboard.mxo. And there's two ways you can deal with these, and I'll show you both of them. Depending on the computer you're using, you might prefer one or the other. We have to let Macs know that these files exist. And so one way to do that is if we go to our Macs app in Mac and right-click it. It's actually not an executable, it's a package, so we can look at the package contents. And there's a folder. Inside the folder there's some resources, and inside the resources there's this C74 folder that has all of our Macs objects. They're in this externals folder. And they're divided up based on whether they're MSP, Macs, or Jitter, or these other types of objects. So if I want to add a Macs object, I'll put it in the Macs folder. So all I would have to do is take that MXO, that's the actual object, and drop it in there. As you can see, I already have this one there. The help file, then I just go down to help, Macs, put it in there. Okay. That process is kind of convoluted. It gets old fast. If you're using multiple computers, you have to like put these things on all the computers. If you're using a lab computer and you don't have administrative access to it, you might not be able to do this. So let's look at a simpler but perhaps less good way. The other thing I can do is somewhere within my Macs file structure, right, wherever I'm keeping my patches, I've got a bunch of them on Dropbox. I'm going to make a new folder and I can call it whatever I want. I've just called it external library, and I can drag this whole aka keyboard thing in there. And I'm going to edit this so it doesn't have the two. And like I've got this other one, JIT Freenect, grab in there. So then back in Macs, if I go to Options and File Preferences, this is where I can manage where Macs looks for files that it knows about. So all I have to do is say like, hey, look for objects in this folder I just made. So I'm going to add a new path. I'm going to choose my folder, and I want to select my external library. Great. And now it knows to look for stuff in that folder as well. This can be helpful if you want to include a bunch of video files, a bunch of audio files, so that Macs can just find them so that your read video.mov message works, or your sfplay open message works with your files right away. It just will know where all your media is if you add them to the file path. And you can tell if it's working or not, because if it's working, it'll look like a normal object. If it's not working, like I do not have aka.we, it'll be orange. Okay, so if it's orange and you think you've got it in the right place, you don't. Keep working at it. So that's how we add externals. Any external, whether it's one of the aka ones, whether it's from someone else, same process. Just put them in that your library folder and add the search path, or add them directly to the package itself. So if I want to manipulate the mouse with this one, this is actually pretty straightforward. I can use a message to this object called move to, all one word, and then an X and a Y point that is the pixel on my monitor, right? So it's going to move it to X pixel 100 and Y pixel 200. So when I click this, my mouse moves over there. Click, click, and you'll see every time I click it, it's always going back to the same spot, which is 100 pixels over and 200 pixels down from the origin up here. Okay, that could be cool. So that can put my mouse in a particular spot, and then maybe I've got a button in some other application that I want to click there. I can send it a click 0 message which will tell it to click the right mouse button. Now that is not terribly useful, right? Because if I have to click this message to send the message to click, then like the mouse has to be there, right? So I need something else to trigger the sending of this click 0 message. So what I've done here, just as a demonstration, is said, okay, if key is 49, send the click 0 message, right? So I'm going to go over here. So I'm hovering my mouse over here. I'm going to press 1 on my keyboard, which is the 49 key, and it should move the mouse over again. There we go. Cool. I can be destructive to myself and press 1 again to close my patch. Goodbye. Okay, so that I can play around with that. Let's see if it will double click. So I'm going to try to open the key press 1 by pressing 1 twice. Great. So that patcher doesn't have to be like it doesn't have the focus of your system to work. It's always running in the background now. So I have to be careful about typing 1. Okay. Likewise, so that was simulating some mouse stuff. I can simulate keyboard presses too. If I, for whatever reason, I want to have someone's motion, some volume, something simulate a key press, I can do that with AKA keyboard. I'm going to get it from the same place. This one, I've included this rather large message here, which is also demonstrative as a way to show you how to launch a website from Macs. So if I have a message with a semicolon, Macs launch browser, and then the site, and I click that, it's going to open up that website in my browser. So the unfortunate thing with AKA keyboard is that it doesn't use the ASCII numbers for the keys. So 49 is not actually key 1. Wah, wah. I need to use a key code. Fortunately though, key will give me the key codes. The reason for this is that the key codes are platform specific, so whether you've got a Mac or a Windows or an Acer or whatever computer, it's going to be slightly different what those key codes are. So for instance, looking at here, if I go back to my spacebar, it's ASCII 32, but it's 49 for my key code. If I go back to key A, it's 97 in ASCII, it's 0 in key code. If I go back to 1, it's 49 in ASCII and 18 in my key code. So if I send a message key 1 to AKA keyboard, it's going to simulate that I pressed that 1 key. So let me just hit A so you can watch this change. And I hit here, and it thinks that I pressed 1. Maybe useful, maybe not. But those are some other ways that you might be able to then, in a very rudimentary way, engage with other programs or websites or other things that are running on your computer. If you know that you've got a website with a link that's always going to be down here, I can move the mouse there and simulate a click using something else to drive that. Questions about externals or the AKA ones?
Can you just like put the externals in the external folder in Windows, or should you actually like make an externals library folder?
Where's the externals folder in Windows?
It's in.
Is it in the Macs?
It's like Mac 7 resources and then externals.
Right. Yes. If you have that, should work. That should work. Yeah. That's also a new Macs thing, Mac 7 thing too. You might have this Mac 7 folder that has. Yeah. See, I've got packages. I don't have externals. So on Windows, maybe you do, which is great. Speaking of packages, I want to talk about packages too. Packages are another form of library. They are a bit easier to work with because I can go to File, Show Package Manager, and it's going to give me a list view of packages that are available. These are different from externals in that they almost certainly will work with the current version of Macs on your platform. They're not made by Cycling74. They're still community contributed, but Cycling74 has looked at them and been like, yep, that's okay, that works. This is reliable. Okay, so they've like passed a check phase. And if we look at one of these, like blocks, it'll tell you a little bit about it. It'll have a link to the website that you can go to. It'll tell you when it was updated. It'll give you the system requirements there. And then if you want to install it, you just click this install button. It'll automatically download it, and it actually puts it in that Mac 7 packages folder. So that's convenient. So you don't have to deal with moving files around or creating linkages to things. It's automatic. So a couple of the ones I really like, if I look at my installed packages, Mubu is interesting. Max for the visual artist. This one is great, particularly if you're learning Max, because it shows you a bunch of different strategies for using Max with visual arts. And the other one that I particularly like is cv.jit. This is probably the most utilitarian package, gets used all the time, very popular. And CV stands for computer vision, so it's a bunch of computer vision algorithms for jitter. Most, not all, but most of the packages, once they're installed, will have this little launch button, which is cool, that will give you whoever wrote the packages their kind of view of how to navigate their package, which is in itself a Max patch. And so just to show you, depending on the package, it's going to look completely different, based on whoever wrote it, how they wanted to design it.
How much do most of them cost?
Packages?
Yeah.
I believe they're all free.
Yeah, right there, right above your mouth. Sensor.
Yep, OSC, Arduino, that's Max 101. Max 102 has your Face OSC, Connect, CV stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in here. So looking at CV.jit, let's look at one thing we can do with CV.jit to add a bit of complexity to our toolbox here. And we've got face tracking. So I've added an input here for face tracking. And some of this is going to be familiar and some of it's going to be new. We've got a key metro, we've got our jit.grab, we've got our RGB to Luma, so we're making a grayscale image. And then what's different, instead of like going into background subtraction, we've got cv.jit.faces. So if I didn't have that package installed, this would not work. That would be orange. It goes into another object called cv.jit.faces.draw. And what this is going to do is going to try to identify faces in the camera feed. The one thing that I have to do, and it might be my installation of cv.jit, but I have to, how it works is it's looking at a very low resolution image, right, 80 by 60 pixels, for things that it thinks looks like faces, but you have to tell it what it should think a face looks like, right? So we give it a data file of like a generic face, and it will see like how much does what I'm seeing look like this face. So to do that, I'm going to go to read, and I'm going to go to that file that I had there, which was Max 7 packages cv.jit misc, and it comes with 4 face files. You can find other ones on the internet and add them. They're XML files, so it's just a collection of data points. And I'll just go with face 1. I open that. I turn on my metro. I open my camera. Hello, class. And so you can see it has found my face. There's my face, and it's drawn a green box around it. This is, Not terribly robust and very processor heavy. Glasses will mess with it, so I'll take those off. If I tilt, it'll lose me at some point. There we go. So it doesn't do profiles. Although you can find profile XML face files if your application should specifically look for faces. I'm kind of curious, like a neat thing we could try to do, like could we write a face XML file for like a cat and train it to recognize cat faces instead of human faces, you know, like why not? Or just cats in general, like the profile of a cat. I need to leave those off. I can barely see. Okay. So it's got my face, and you'll notice a few things about this, right? As I move my face around the screen, it's going to follow me. It can handle a bit of head tilt, but not a whole lot, right? At some point, it's going to lose my face. So it's not terribly robust, but you'll see that box gets smaller and bigger as I move closer and away from the camera there. And so then what I've added to this is what cv.jit.faces is actually giving me is 2 points. This corner and this corner of this box, and 2 XY points that contain the face. And so all I'm doing in this little subpatcher here is based on that information calculating out the X and the Y position of the center of the box. So where in that 80 by 60 frame is the center of my face. So you could do something like adjust the volume of your patch based on where someone's face is. This Z value here is kind of a make-believe. It's not really the Z value. The web camera doesn't have depth. But what that is the width of this box. So that's an approximation for Z value, because as I get closer, it's going to get bigger. And as I get farther away, it's going to get smaller. So let's do something with this really quickly. Let me make a beep. Nah, not even that. I'm just going to drag in an audio file. Where's my favorite one? Cherokee. Alright, I've got, oops, I need to be in edit mode. Cherokee. Okay, I've got an audio file. I need a gain, and I need an easy DAC. Alright, and so we know if I loop this. Cool. So I've got this file going. Using our new friend, scale, I know that the X value of this face is going to be between 0 and 80, because that's the size that I'm grabbing from the camera. And I know from looking at the inspector of this gain object that that's going to be a value between 0 and 158. So I should be able to use the X value of my face to control the volume of this. Totally rad. Okay, so that's an example also then of how you can start combining these things to do different stuff. Questions about face detection or packages?